This is Erin Paula Thompson, Programs Coordinator with the Library of Virginia. Today is February 29th, 2012, and I am interviewing Miss Elizabeth McIntosh. Good morning.
Good morning.
For the record, can you share with us where you were born and when?
I was born in Washington, D.C., March 1, tomorrow, 1915.
Excellent. What are some of your fondest memories of childhood?
Of what?
Of childhood? Of being a little girl?
Oh, I think I used to like to write in little notebooks, and I'd write all kinds of stories and things and then hide them so nobody would find them. But it was kind of expressing myself even in those days and writing, and it was kind of just fun to, I'd go sit up in a big tree, perhaps a banyan tree or something in Hawaii, and write things and hide them. But they were just fun to do that. And, there were other things that happened too, but I remember this sort of more than anything.
That's a great memory. What were your favorite subjects in school?
I liked English literature and history.
What did you like about those?
I guess the just reading these wonderful books and things that sounded so good. I liked the sound of them, of writing, and history. I was also interested in that, just because I was fascinated with what had gone before.
Yeah,
might be coming up.
How did you become a journalist?
Well, both my mother and father were journalists when they met, and then Dad continued to be. He's a sports editor for his whole life, and so I was sort of into the news racket, as it were, very early on, and I got to meet all these interesting people that might drop by the house, and especially Dad's sports fan, like Walter Johnson would come, and Dad said he used to put me on his knee and sit there and talk baseball at me. And it was just fun growing up that way, and I just never got out of that milieu.
You stuck with the journalism.
Yes.
How was your experience as a journalist different from your male counterparts?
Well, it was, I guess, the same thing with any woman trying to make her way. And I was, when I got a job on the Honolulu Advertiser through my father, he put me on the sports section. My salary, I think it was $15 a week, and I noticed that women never got many raises in their salaries, and that was one thing that kind of annoyed me because I worked there for quite a while before anybody. It just felt like you weren't getting anywhere. But that was about the only sort of main thing. Otherwise, in newspaper work, you're pretty much on par with the men, and you can write things that they can't.
What was it like to cover the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941?
Well, see, I was married then, and my husband was in the Navy. He was a Navy Reserve, but he was also a newspaper reporter. And we'd been to a big party the night before, and I'd gotten up early, and he was still sleeping. And I started to make breakfast and had the radio on. It was the Mormon choir singing. All of a sudden, there was a break, and somebody came on and said, "The islands are under attack," and then it went off the air again. And I thought, what in the world is this? The Army is doing something. And then at about the same time, my photographer called and said, "Hey, we've got to go into Honolulu." We lived outside the island, out of Honolulu. "You got to go in there. Something's happening there. The Pearl Harbor has been attacked." So he came and picked me up, and we drove in on this sunny Sunday. And it was like people were still on their way to church, maybe, or walking their dog, and even playing golf as we were going by. And then as we got closer into Honolulu, you began to feel the tents there. People were, the cars were kind of sort of, well, they were, well, it was just a tense feeling. And we passed a kind of a marketplace which had been bombed, and there was Christmas stuff all over the place. And in the middle of it was this little kid sitting there playing with and having a wonderful time, little Japanese boy. And my cameraman said, hey, that would make a wonderful picture. But the kid's laughing. Why don't we do something about that? And he said, go and see what you can do. And so I went over and tried to talk to him. He wouldn't pay any attention to me. He was just having a great time. So I pinched him gently, and then he started to cry. And then we got this great picture, which I think made Life magazine. That was the beginning of Pearl. But they wouldn't let me go out the first day, naturally, women and all that. But the next day I was able to get out, and it was just terrible. The way the ship's upside down, rolling, and you knew that all these men were in there. They were all just forever, and they still are. It was the saddest, terrible day. I covered the hospital that December 7th and talked to people that had been hurt. There was one little girl she was just dead. She was just lying there in this hospital, and she had a little jump rope. She was holding the wooden things, but the rope had all been burned off. And it was just kind of a touching and terrible thing to see. It was a tragic day.
It does. It sounds like those are memories that stay with you forever, too. Those are memories that stay with you forever, too.
Yes, that's true.
On a different note, how did you begin working for the Office of Strategic Services?
Well, see, I wanted to get overseas and become a war correspondent. But again, being a woman, it was hard to get that. And but they did say, Scripps Howard picked me up. This is a news service, and I got a job covering the White House. And so I was in Washington in one of the press conferences, and Mr. Roosevelt was giving a little talk. And afterwards, I was sort of standing around talking to some of the reporters. This gentleman came up that looked familiar, and I said, he said, would you be interested in working for the government? And I said, only if you could promise to send me overseas. And he said, I could promise that. And then it turned out that he was a friend of my father's, and Dad had been telling him about me, and he worked for OSS. So then he got the idea that because I'd been studying Japanese and that I was a newspaper reporter, they needed some people to do a certain type of work overseas. So that's how he approached me.
Can you describe what your job was for the OSS?
Well, they called it morale operations, and it was a job where you had to try and influence the enemy's thinking by means of pamphlets, rumors, lies, any possible way to get to them so that they would stop fighting or be disillusioned in their own cause. And especially the ones that were so loyal to the emperor, we had trouble with them. It was quite a job, and we all had to work on it to try and think different ways of getting to them.
What were the career opportunities for women during that time?
Very good. Well, they were in different, I mean, there were stenographers and all, and there were people, well, like Julia Child had a wonderful job kind of coordinating activities and getting people, sending them overseas. And finally, she and I went overseas together to China, and she was in a sort of an administrative job. And then there were the others that were doing like I was, and then also translators. They had all kinds of women doing all sorts of things that were quite important.
Did you feel different from the women who were home in the United States because of your job?
Not really. I didn't have much. Really, when we got overseas, we never had a chance to even meet anybody because we were behind the lines.
Yeah. Did you ever feel really overwhelmed or tired as a woman in your chosen profession? And if so, what did you do to overcome those feelings?
No, I never did. I was always kind of, they said, gung-ho, and never seemed to get tired of doing anything. I was always interested in stuff. And the kind of work I was doing was fascinating.
That's excellent. What would you say is your greatest achievement so far in life?
Well, I've done a lot of things that to me were important. I've written 4 books, and I've worked for, well, I worked for CIA too, but I can't talk about that. But I think the one that sort of I keep thinking about it was the work, the morale operation we did against the Japanese soldiers in Burma who were fighting us in northern Burma, and they would not surrender. But we came across a document from one of their stations, and it was a government document that we could revise and rewrite. And we got some, we were able to get a Japanese prisoner of war to help us work on it. We finally got this document which stated that under certain conditions, like when you run out of ammunition or when you're completely surrounded, if you're wounded, you may surrender, and the emperor will forgive you. And it was all very properly stated, as if it had come right from Hirohito himself. And we were able to get it into behind the lines by planting it on the body. They killed this man. He was a runner for the Japanese who was taking their material to them, put it in his sack, and then one of the Burmese went and told Japanese soldiers that this man had been killed, but that they should go and get him. And then the Japanese soldiers went through his packet and found this. And they saw him going through it and talking about it. And then at the end there, the Japanese were beginning to surrender in Burma, northern Burma. So I've always felt that was sort of kind of a wonderful thing to have done during the war.
So you kind of gave them permission to surrender through
Yes.
the document you created?
Right.
That's excellent. It's a great memory.
It was. It is.
If you could give one bit of advice or inspiration for young women, what would it be?
I think just believe in yourself. That would be it.
What would that look like for young ladies?
Just don't be afraid to do things that you think are right, you think you can do and are able to do it, and never doubt your ability to come through.
That's a wonderful piece of advice.